Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining Polar Bears International on Tundra Buggy 1. We are out here on the shores of Hudson Bay with the Frontiers North Adventure Tundra Buggy, and we have some amazing guests here to talk to you today about using technology to track polar bears. And of course, many of you already are using technology to follow us throughout bear season, watching the Explore.org live cam, which hopefully you've been watching today. We've had a mom and cub behind us throughout most of the day. It's a little bit windy and snowy here right now, so they're mostly hunkered down and covered in snow, but we promise you they are out there. We've been keeping an eye on them. But I am going to introduce our excellent panel today, and we would love it if you would send in some questions. You can type them to email at questions@pbears.org, so you send us an email. Or if you're watching this on the explore.org page, just put your questions in the comment section, and I'll get them here on my iPad. So we'd love to hear from you. First, I'm going to go down the line here. I'll start with my colleague, BJ. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is BJ Kirchhofer, and I work for Polar Bears International. I get a really cool job. I get to spend part of my year here on Buggy 1, broadcasting in the classrooms and talking about science. And then the other part of the year, I get to go into the field and work with polar bears.
Thanks, BJ. Charlie.
My name is Charlie Welch. I'm working research and technology at Northrop Grumman, and I have a pretty cool job as well. I get to work on technology to aid in a variety of wildlife applications, and also get to work on a variety of aerospace applications as well.
Thank you. And Nick.
I'm Dr. Nicholas Pilfold. I work at the Institute for Conservation Research at San Diego Zoo Global. I also have a great job. I get to work on polar bears. That's my primary study species, as well as some other large carnivores. And then I get to team up with great guys like Charlie and develop some really cool tech.
Right, and I'm sure everyone right now is looking at this really cool tech, wondering what we've brought into Buggy 1. Charlie, would you mind kind of giving us a rundown of what this thing is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I can start with saying that, we work at Northrop Grumman, which is, an aerospace and defense company that has a really rich scientific history going all the way back to the moon landing to now the James Webb Space Telescope and our NASA Global Hawk. And, we're a company that really likes to push the field of science and technology. And what we have in front of us today is the habitat monitoring system. So, with our collaboration with the San Diego Zoo Global, we're actually working on this piece of technology to help study sea ice in a whole variety of ways and help to monitor polar bears to see how the change in sea ice is really affecting the populations. And so, we built a variety of technologies to withstand this environment and to withstand the cold, the wind, make sure that all the sensors are operating correctly, make sure that the zoo is able to get the kind of data they need. And, we're out here actually getting to test it in the field, as they can see around us.
That's so exciting. And you have your team members here with you today. We have some people in the background. Maybe the camera can pan over and they can say hi. Now, do you guys mind maybe pointing out a couple things on this drone, telling us what they do? It looks a little complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start down the line, give them a quick intro really quick. So
Sure.
First we have Chris Pinescu, who worked on the hardware design and making sure this vehicle can withstand the cold. Next we have Victor Wang, who worked on the software integration and making sure that all the sensors could operate efficiently and effectively. And lastly, Greg Kravitz, who worked on the hardware integration and making sure that everything on the system worked really cleanly together. And so the main part of the system, if you guys want to help me take it off, is actually this cool little sensor pod that we've developed. And so the zoo's mission that they have of wanting to study sea ice and study the kind of polar bear's habitat in a really fine scale resolution and detail, what we worked on is a pod to house a variety of cameras and sensors that, thank you, that will be able to fly over sea ice and use 3 different cameras and 2 different radars to be able to see sea ice in a whole variety of spectrums, so that when Nick and the San Diego Zoo team want to really understand a polar bear's habitat in really fine detail from the air, what's happening with the sea ice, they can fly a system like this that houses visual cameras and multispectral cameras to really see that fine scale change in sea ice. And obviously, as you can see, it can withstand the Arctic ruggedization by having, benefits of working at a company that works on spacecraft is you can use space-grade materials and parts and foams to make sure that, like withstanding the super cold of space, we can withstand the super cold of the Arctic environment as well. So it's a pretty cool piece of technology that we designed to help aid and push their mission of conservation that we're really excited to get out here and test.
And how cold do you think this can operate in?
So, we've even we've tested it at 30 below zero. We've stuck it in, a satellite chamber that they're meant to test spacecraft parts, right next to some of our parts that we tested James Webb in. And, we unfortunately put this guy in that Arctic environment up in California, but it was able to withstand those Arctic temperatures pretty well.
That's amazing. And people can follow your progress with this online at #Polarize. Is that correct? And Polarize the project name. Is that right?
Yeah, Polarize the project.
Okay, great. And these guys are heading up the coast a little bit, and tomorrow?
That's right.
Is
yeah,
that
we're up
right?
tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, Nick, could you talk a bit about that and how this is really going to help polar bears?
Absolutely. So we had a challenge for Northrop Grumman. That was to develop a system for us that is much less invasive in the sense of being able to track polar bears in a non-invasive, non-noisy way. So when we're out and we're doing research, typically we fly around in A-stars, and those helicopters are really noisy. And the problem for us is that the bears know that we're there before we can see them. And so what we challenged the team was to make a system that was not nearly as noisy, very quiet, but also could pick up the high-resolution data that we need to track polar bears as they make important life decisions, like right now, when they're leaving land and heading back out to that sea ice.
So neat. So we already had a question come in. Charlie, what if the drone falls in the water?
Well, if the drone falls in the water, I imagine it most likely will sink. We did not develop too many flotation devices for them.
Can you guys tell me how this relationship started? How does a biologist start working with a company like yours to develop new tools to study wildlife?
So last year we had the kind of first iteration of this project, which was called the Wildlife Challenge, and actually grew out of our employee population that wanted to be able to bring technology for science and conservation in a variety of ways. And we reached out to the zoo and talked about what the collaboration would look like and whether they'd have a need for this kind of technology in the field. And from there we saw this really amazing work relationship of understanding their scientific problems and then feeding that to us as engineers and saying, like, all right, now we got to work on making this thing withstand one of the harshest environments in the world. And now we're up here for our second year and kind of really excited to showcase what grew out of that amazing collaboration.
That is excellent. And collaborations are key in the science world, whether you're in biology or any field. Working with each other and relying on each other's strengths is really important. And at Polar Bears International, we do similar projects that rely on collaborations. And one, we are collaborating also with the San Diego Zoo Global. But BJ, maybe you can start talking about that because it is a project that you started a while ago.
Yeah, so we're working, we started a project looking at maternal polar bear dens in northern Alaska. And we wanted to broaden that scope, and so reached out to Megan Owen and Nick over at the San Diego Zoo, and we moved that project to Svalbard, Norway, with the help of the Norwegian Polar Institute. So the three entities came together, and now we're working to deploy cameras, high-definition cameras, that watch mother polar bears and their cubs when they emerge from the den sites.
Great. And what sort of stuff will that tell us about polar bears?
So we're looking at a bunch of different stuff, and again, it's kind of merging different technologies. We're looking at polar bears. The ones that we're studying have radio collars on, and they've got almost like a polar bear Fitbit inside of these collars. But we're not really quite sure what each of these behaviors are that the collars are picking up, and so we want to correlate that with the video footage that's picked up at the den site. So we're looking at that kind of information. We're also looking at just how many cubs are there. We're counting cubs. We're looking at relative cub size, so how big are they compared to their siblings, as well as moms themselves, and how long do they stick around? What are they doing?
Really important questions. And maybe we can back up for a sec. Nick, could you expand a little bit more about why we're concerned about polar bears and trying to study them in all these crazy ways? They're really hard animals to study.
Yeah,
so,
very difficult.
yeah.
As both you and I know from our work, yeah. So one of the reasons that we're really concerned about polar bears is the rapid change in sea ice. And so the regions in which we're working right now are experiencing some of the most dramatic changes in sea ice loss as the climate warms due to greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, in the region that we're deploying maternal den cameras that BJ was just talking about, that region has seen 40 days less sea ice cover per decade. So they're really losing ice in a very rapid manner there, and we're concerned how that affects maternal denning, because that's really the fundamental component to a population, is if these females can get in a den, have cubs, and then get them out on the sea ice where they can start hunting again. Here in the Hudson Bay, we've also seen dramatic changes in the polar bear population. In the mid-'80s, the population around here was about 1,200 bears. We're now down to around 800 bears currently, and this population has gone through a lot of sea ice change as well, and that's why we're focused here with the UAV and Northrop Grumman.
Great. Thank you so much. We had another question come in, and maybe both of you could answer it together. Someone is wondering how loud the drone is. Will animals hear it, and would it scare them away?
So that is a really key question for us, and it's actually part of our research that we're doing now. So what we have with us is a really high quality microphone, and we're going to be taking information on the sound of the unit at different heights to make sure that when we do deploy this unit to do polar bear observation, it's in a non-invasive manner. And what's really neat about it is that the zoo has done some really cool research, Dr. Megan Owen led, on polar bear hearing sensitivity with the bears at San Diego Zoo. And so we have a very good understanding of what their hearing sensitivity is at different ranges and different frequencies. And so we're able to pair the information we get from the sound quality off this drone in the habitat that we'll be flying it to what polar bears can hear, and then we come up with a best management practices guideline for this UAV.
Oh, that's fantastic. And doing these sorts of projects here in Churchill makes a lot of sense. It's known as the polar bear capital of the world for a few reasons, and one of those reasons being that the polar bears migrate through here during this time of year. In the summer, there's no sea ice in Hudson Bay, so the polar bears are on shore, and right around now, when the sea ice should be freezing up, the bears come back to shore and kind of get first in the dinner line, so it's a great spot to see polar bears, and that's why they're so well studied here, and it makes a great location to try pilot projects. And we are also at Polar Bears International trying another pilot project this fall, and maybe BJ, you could talk a bit about that.
Totally. So I think this kind of falls into another tool in the toolbox. It doesn't matter if it's for scientists or if it's for resource managers. And what we're looking at is using they call it a compact surveillance radar, a radar system that's designed to track targets, human-sized, moving into a certain area. And so we've taken these very small radar panels. They're about this big. And we've put them on the community center in Churchill. So this is the building that houses the school, the hospital, also the swimming pool and the bowling alley. So it's pretty heavily used building. And it's also right along the coast and one of the places that's most exposed to the coastline. And so polar bears would be easily spotted from this building, but maybe people aren't always watching. And so the whole idea behind this project is to see if we can see polar bears coming in and then alert the people that would then take care of the bears.
Right. And ideally, if this works, this is something that hopefully we could provide to northern communities farther north. So one thing we're seeing as sea ice declines in this area and other areas across the north, polar bears are spending more time on land and coming into more contact with people. And that's not good for people or for polar bears. So these kind of early detection systems are really key and could become a really important part of polar bear protection.
Yeah, definitely keeping humans safe and polar bears safe.
Yeah, it's important for both species for sure. And you guys, I'm going to back up for a second. So I think some people missed the very beginning of this, and they would like a reiteration of how this drone is used specifically on polar bears.
Sure, we can quickly recap.
Yeah.
So the partnership came together between Northrop Grumman and San Diego Zoo Global. Actually, Charlie was the one who reached out to us, but this has been on our minds as well for a long time, that we'd love to have the high-end technology that's in front of you available to us to study polar bears. And so what the Northrop Grumman team has done is created a sensor suite that's on the bottom of this unmanned aerial system that can give us remarkably fine-scale information on sea ice habitat characteristics that polar bears depend on. And so this is information that we're going to be able to measure at a scale and resolution that we've never been able to do before, thanks to the fact that we have this partnership with Northrop Grumman.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, and I can add in as well, talking more to Nick's thing on the fine scale, we have an example of our sensor pod right here that is meant to carry 5 distinct, really high-resolution sensors to be able to kind of inform the decision-making of the scientists on really what's happening to the polar bear's habitat. So we have, visual cameras, we have multispectral cameras, we have 2 different radars that, help them visualize sea ice in a way that they can understand thickness and dispersion and topography, and a whole variety of things that, we really hope can help them make those really critical decisions on what's happening with the ice and what's happening with their polar bear populations.
Thank you. We also have another question come in about other ways to track polar bears. And Nick, I'm going to throw this over to you, and I'm going to hand you a prop.
Oh, no.
Because I know you've got experience with these. Maybe you could talk about this a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So this is the, I would say the traditional way, and still the most prominent way of tracking a polar bear. This is a polar bear collar. It's a GPS collar. So what you're looking at here on the bottom is the battery unit. That's the heaviest part of the collar. It's the biggest part of the collar because it's the most important. It keeps the collar functioning through dark Arctic winters and for up to 2 years on this polar bear. This technology has been revolutionary to us because we're able to track polar bears through 24-hour periods of darkness in the winter, through the conditions that no human would be able to withstand, and be able to understand where they go and what they do during those periods of time. That is accomplished by this unit on the top, which is the receiver for a satellite signal. It gives us a location for where that polar bear is. There's also an additional antenna unit here that can allow us to locate the polar bear if we're out operating. And then they also have a unique drop-off system on the side here that automatically drops the collar off after 2 years of use. So these don't stay on the polar bear for their entire lives. They're just out there for a couple of years with this collar, giving us very important information. So this is traditionally how we've done it. The only advantage to the system that we see in front of us compared to a collar is the collars, their resolution is quite coarse. So it gives us really good information over a very broad scale. But the information that we can get from a unit like the UAS that's in front of you, this drone, is much finer scale and something we can't get just with satellite data alone.
And how tight do these collars go on? Someone wants to know.
Oh, so usually when we put them on, we put 2 fingers in to make sure that there's enough room there for the bear, because the bears change in size over the season as they eat seals and gain weight. So we don't want to make it too tight, but at the same time we don't want to make it too loose so it falls off.
Fantastic. One interesting thing about the collars is that traditionally we could only collar female polar bears because males have necks that are much thicker than their heads, and they were more able to pull the collars off. And another new advance in technology has been that we're able to now put GPS units in ear tags. And so finally out here, just last year for the first time, we were able to put GPS ear tags in a polar bear's ear, and they're only the size of a small box, really. And we are finally getting data on where the males are going and even where subadults are going. So those are like the teenagers of the bears. And those demographics are really important for us to know more about, and having better information about the entire population is going to help us protect them better and make better decisions for their future. We've got a couple more questions about the drone. An interesting one. Polar bears have a great sense of smell. Are they going to smell this?
That's a great question. That might be actually.
I had never thought about that actually with
I actually
drones.
hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
The primary thing we've been thinking about is sound.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're going to do with this unit when we're out there is if we do encounter a polar bear and we fly over, is to understand what kind of behavioral response we're getting from that bear.
Great.
And so, you know, if it's a sound thing primarily, we might expect the bear to pick it up a little bit earlier than smell, because this is a battery-powered unit, so there's no emissions off the unit at all, so there's nothing that's really going to give a scent trail for where the unit will be coming in.
Yeah, how is this powered specifically, and how long will it last?
So it's an all-electric battery-powered system,
cool.
which was one of the huge challenges of making sure the batteries stay warm, because
Totally.
batteries hate cold more than anything.
Yeah, we know that well. Yeah.
So our team did a phenomenal job of designing and rapid prototyping and testing what this environment's going to look like, and with our full insulation suite covering the batteries, we can get about 25 minutes to 30 minutes of flight time on this guy.
That's pretty impressive. Now, BJ, with your maternal den cams and even the RF spotter, how are those things being powered?
We use, you guys are using lithium battery in these? Yeah, we use lithium batteries, just
Cool.
really, really big ones. They're about, yeah, we have about 60 pounds of lithium batteries in the maternal den
Wow.
system. Yeah.
That's
So-
impressive. Yeah, and maybe for those of you that are watching via explore.org, you may watch our Cape cams occasionally. Very great cams, run all year round. Could you talk a bit about how you power those? And BJ was just out there a couple days ago doing some upkeep on them.
Yeah, sure. So if you've tuned into the Cape Churchill camera, we've got an old research tower out there that Dr. Ian Sterling put up. I think it was maybe late 60s, early 70s to look at polar bear behavior. We've taken that tower and we've put a methanol fuel cell in there. We've put solar panels on the outside, and we've put a wind generator up on top. And between the 3 of those alternative energy sources, we're able to power those the 2 cameras on there, as well as the radio equipment that brings the signal back to town. So every once in a while, we do have to go out and check on things to see how it's doing. The methanol does need to be replenished, so we bring methanol jugs out and we put that back in. Turns out when we arrived, the wind generator was missing a blade and its tail, so it wasn't running that well. So we tried to fix that up, and hopefully that will last us through the winter.
Yeah, the winds get crazy out at Cape Churchill, as, again, those of you that watch that cam know. And that's another question. What kind of winds can this drone sustain? We were trying to sleep out here the other night. It was 90-kilometer-an-hour winds gusting, and it was hard to even walk.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely not that high. Mostly commercial aircraft's not flying. We're not going to fly either.
Yeah, fair enough.
But we have a safety cutoff around 25 miles an hour that we want to make sure that to do their mission day in and day out and see the sea ice change, we don't want to risk it too much. And we have and for our pilots on our ground station as well, sitting out in the cold and flying where you can't move your hands or anything else, and that amount of wind and cold is also pretty burdensome. So, right around 25 miles an hour is normally our cutoff for what we see as like a safe operation.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
BJ, we have another question I'm going to pass to you and Bridget to the technology again that you've used. Is it true that you can't see polar bears with thermographic cameras?
Well, you can actually, and we had one out here last year. We used a FLIR camera and was photographing a polar bear right from the back deck of Buggy 1. So you can definitely see them. I'm not sure how that myth got started.
Sure, I know they're insulated so well, but they still do
But
release
they're
heat.
definitely still releasing heat. And
Yeah.
thermal cameras, I mean, some of them are sensitive down to like a tenth of a degree.
Wow.
And so, I mean, you're going to be able to see a polar bear for sure. And it's actually pretty neat. So when we look at the footage that we captured last year, you can actually see the snow has slightly warmed after they pick up their feet as they walk. And so you can see warm footprints in the snow as they move away from you. So it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very sensitive tool.
It is very neat. And you also used it to find female polar bears in dens.
Yeah, it's one of our primary ways of finding female polar bears in dens if they're not wearing collars. It's still a little tricky. I think you really have to know what you're doing in order to use that tool. And there are people that are trained, you know, to be able to use that tool effectively, but it's not easy. The wind can't be blowing very hard. The snow has to be fairly shallow. It's possible, but difficult.
Possible. Well, what I'd like to do now, because I think we have a lot of students watching that are pretty interested, I'll maybe start with Nick and go down. If you guys could talk briefly about kind of how you got into your job and what you like about your job, I think that would be really helpful for some students out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always sort of been connected with biology ever since I was a kid because I grew up on a farm. You know, I had dogs and chickens and horses, and we had lots of acreage, and bears would wander in our property and out of our property, so there was always that connection. And it just naturally grew out of that. In university, I did a degree in biology, and then after that I took a little time off, and I went to Africa and volunteered and tracked some large carnivores and fell in love with that idea. And then I wanted to come back to Canada and work on something large and toothy in Canada, which is a polar bear. And so I did my PhD here, and that eventually led me to work with San Diego Zoo Global now, and I work on polar bears and other large carnivores, so it's a perfect fit for me. And part of what I want to say too is this job gets me interaction with fields that I don't have any expertise in. And this is what is really great about this partnership, is that you don't have to be an expert in every field of STEM. I'm a biologist, not an engineer. There's no way in my wildest dreams I could put together what's in front of you today. But that's why we partner up with engineers who can bring that technology to life.
Thanks. Charlie?
Yeah, I'd say for me, you know, I just grew up as a kid, you know, a total kind of space geek. I was super into like outer space and galaxies and all that kind of stuff. And so I majored in aerospace engineering and got to learn like how planes fly and how planets form and all this other stuff. And kind of the theme of, you know, what it's like to understand the world around you and how technology helps us, you know, see what is almost invisible to us, you know, down to atoms and beyond. And, you know, I got lucky enough to work at a company where, you know, I get to come up here to the subarctic and work on vehicles like this to aid, you know, these amazing science missions. And I also get to go in the lab and see space telescopes that are going out to look, you know, all the way back to the Big Bang. And so, you know, that kind of passion of really diving into this amazing world around us from small to big and from human to polar bear is, you know, I think just drew me to this field that I'm almost obsessed with. I'm like in love with it. You know, I get so excited to come up here and work with our amazing team, and you know, work with Nick and the San Diego Zoo, who just every time we're sitting alone, just kind of hanging out, like we're just kind of firing off polar bear questions and wildlife questions, like how do they do this? Like, oh, okay, that's so cool. Like I can't believe they could even do that, and it just kind of leads us inspiration for more inspiration, and it's something that, you know, I want to continue on. And for kids out there that are, you know, thinking about going into STEM or engineering or biology, you know, I never thought in 1,000 years I would get to go from biology, science, engineering, polar bears at all, and you know, it just takes the inspiration and passion to do it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. BJ.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time out of the doors when I was a kid as well, and really enjoyed that. And went through school, actually studied photography in university, and met a photographer. And he was really into conservation, and so he kind of helped me along in that field and introduced me to some really neat people here at Polar Bears International. So that's kind of what brought me up here, and I think one of the really special things, like you guys have talked about, in working at PBI, is we do partner with a lot of different folks, and we get to talk about this stuff and we get to use it in the field. So it's really a lot of working with people of a variety of backgrounds that, you know, you can do really cool projects just like this.
Thank you. And for me, also work at Polar Bears International started loving animals when I was a kid. Got into wildlife biology, studied mice and toads for years and loved the little guys. Kind of accidentally ended up in a polar bear lab working with Nick many years ago now, and then volunteering with Polar Bears International at the time. And I volunteered for a few years and eventually got hired. And I love my job because I get to do some science, but I also get to talk to people and bring other people's science to you and talk to students all over the world. We've already reached thousands of kids and adults across the world this year, and it's so much fun to be able to give you access to people that you want to ask questions to. And I maybe will wrap up on one last question, and I'll shoot it to you, Nick, and then BJ and I will take part of it too. But what's the best thing that people can do to help polar bears wherever they are at?
It's absolutely reducing your carbon footprint. And I know that's probably a message you've heard over and over, and sometimes people look at climate change like it's insolvable on an individual scale because they think it's a global issue, and if governments can't do anything about it, well, then it's a wash. And there's nothing further from the truth for that. Everybody has an impact, and we can all make a difference in terms of what we do, whether it's taking vacations that are closer to home, buying food that's locally sourced, just being aware of the steps that you can take as an individual to lower your carbon footprint. Myself, my big point is I don't own a car, and I live close to where I work, and I ride my bike, and that for me helps lower my carbon footprint and make that difference that I think is really important, not only for polar bears but for a lot of other species. Polar bears are the sort of the canary in the coal mine for us, but climate change is affecting all the species across this planet, so we need to be really aware of it.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, and I think I would add that that people should be an advocate for green energy. There's some really cool stuff that's coming, and just because we are using something that's currently people have used for a long time, like internal combustion engines or something, whatever's in your car, it doesn't mean it's the best thing. There's some really neat stuff that's coming down. I think it's going to become, we'll be able to lead better lives because of the neat stuff. So be an advocate for the new stuff that's coming in, and vote for good people that take care of this planet, or will take care of this planet.
Totally. Yeah, this innovative technology, it helps us study animals, it helps us learn a lot about the environment, and it's also going to help us protect the environment if we can move to more of these energies that already exist and we can make them better. So solar, wind, and we do have a solar panel on Buggy One.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah, you want to talk about that for a second, real quick?
We threw
It's
it up
pretty
there
cool.
just to see how it would work, and it's actually pretty effective.
Yeah, it's been helping a lot. It's neat. Yeah, we'll maybe take a photo of that and post it somewhere.
Totally.
We have one. Yeah, it's great. So all these technologies that already exist, we can use more of them. And any of you students that are interested, whether it's in engineering or biology, I'm sure there's ways that you can incorporate cool new things as you get older and get into adulthood and make choices for yourself. And like BJ said, you can vote for good people, or you can become someone that we vote for. That would be really great too. Now, if you're interested in more about this, you can check out the polarbearsinternational.org website. We've got lots of materials for you, whether you're young or old or a teacher or just someone in the public who loves polar bears. One cool thing, if you are in a classroom, is that we are kicking off our Project Polar Bear right now. So groups of students all across the world are taking part in Project Polar Bear. We support you for months. It starts pretty soon and wraps up in the spring, and we want you to do a project in your own community, whether it's technology-based or something simpler like developing a carpool system in your school. We want you to help us lower carbon emissions for polar bears, and check out more on that at our website. So thank you so much to all of you. Is there anything anyone else wants to add before we sign off?
No, I think that we're just excited. Tomorrow we head out to start flying,
Yeah.
and so we're very excited to get it out there.
Yeah. So you've got your food supplies. Going up to your
everything's
remote
setting up
cabin.
the cabin right now. Today they're flying up all our supplies. Tomorrow they fly us in the UAS, and we get to
Great.
work.
Well, it'll be an adventure, and we look forward to following you at #PolarEye and finding some photos and learning how that goes. Yeah, and continue to follow our projects too, and you will maybe be back in Svalbard together in the spring potentially
Definitely.
for more maternal denning. Yeah, lots of cool technology being used. And thanks to this other team off the side here. I don't know if we can swing it around real quick. Thanks, Bradley Hampson on the cam there. Thanks, guys. You're an awesome team. It's been really great working with all of you today. It's been fun to meet you all. So thanks to Northrop Grumman and the San Diego Zoo Global and us at Polar Bears International. Thank you, and Frontiers North Adventures and Explore.org for helping make this happen. And we're going to continue to look for polar bears today. We'll probably head in pretty soon, but stay tuned all next week as we continue to look for polar bears. But like I said, the sea ice is in. There's not a lot around, but if there are, we will
find 'em.
get them on cam and we'll answer your questions. We'll find them. So thanks, everybody. Bye.